they have that as part of it. I don't know. Maybe this is all redundant, and maybe I shouldn't even bother. Like I had said earlier, I don't know what they're going to be doing, but we're here for the presentation. Again, this is Warren B25. It used to be called Warren 45. Maybe I'm a purist, but I think it should go back to Warren 45. But that's my own opinion. So some people have gathered here. I thought I had heard from Charles earlier that they were anticipating roughly 80 people here today. I can tell you this, the lighting is not where I want it to be. The coloring is not quite right here for what the camera is doing. But anyway, this is what I was seeing and what I saw earlier at the lab today. It's a beautiful half-size sculpture of Ezra. And it was Dave Cohn who had carved it. It took him a long time to do it. And David Cohen, and he is right here. And but I recorded quite a bit of that earlier at the lab today. So what I'm hoping to do is, assuming that came out and it was recorded properly, I'm hoping to maybe post that on YouTube when I get a chance. And I think we're going to hear about it tonight. Anyway, it's a beautiful sculpture, and when you look at the level of detail that went into it, it's just it's amazing. And it's the sort of thing where I look at it and it's like, there's no way I could ever do something like that. This building, Warren Hall, was remodeled over the last couple of years, and they've done quite a job with it. It's quite a bit different than it had been before. But if you have been here before, you might recognize various things. I can tell you in the past that little lounge was not there. They've changed. I think to do all this, I think they had to shorten some things. You can see where the stairs end right there. And I believe, I don't know what was there, if anything, in the past. But they've changed quite a bit here. It's amazing what they can do if they want to. Let's look at some of the memories. I hadn't noticed these were today. Let's look at some of the memories that are. Well, first of all, memories.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, exactly. I mean, you just like human beings. So attached. Investigators.
He's all the way on the.
I didn't find the cams that were cam was out there. They never came back. Well, there's sometimes there, but there's no nest. Yeah. They just have the video, and they're working on technical stuff. Technical difficulties. Yeah. Always.
Pretty spicy.
No, shiny.
I didn't know that.
I've chatted a little bit, but it takes me time looking for what to say. And then the thing that's famous on this one is pretty blown by.
Oh, because I actually got this one this afternoon.
Just kidding.
Nighttime, it's pretty cool. Yes, yes. It's a good thing you didn't wear it earlier because it was even, it was warmer.
Okay.
So right now we're in the Peter camp, and there's one rest camp still active.
these are memories that people have shared, and it just shows just how much these cams and the birds that have been seen on them have really meant to so many.
But the building over here is a wonderful day. This is where they event and they start playing. So it's a really nice place. In the...
You should have seen what this building looked like.
Yeah.
So it looks like there's a plaque that says,
It's about warm spears and
wars.
It has character, right? Yeah.
They like the original Robert's Hall. I mean, I almost cried when they said they were going to demolish that.
We have some old buildings.
First time I saw it on campus was just 2 years ago when I moved here with my girlfriend. It's I think it's still a super beautiful campus. Absolutely, like I remember. Oh yeah, I think. Notice the hills and see the campus.
And these are good, are representative of what so many people have
It has its beautiful areas, but it's
certainly felt.
right.
Where you doing stuff?
I was doing masters.
So, whatever that you
They're the first thing.
Seems to be one that's
I actually worked. I wasn't affiliated with any of them. I was through the Western University.
Following me.
But they have a really good.
got 2 more rows, or 2 more columns actually.
Actually, I conversed with the leader, or the president of the first days, and we were going to catch cowbirds in his backyard. See all these amazing feeders. Yeah, he lives so close in our area. And so we ended up not going to
You're welcome to take food.
the time of year, watching them like pan out from when we were like, first started birds for research. But he was very nice. That's about the extent I've had with Thursdays.
Yeah, it's been kind of a long day, but it's
just all over at once, right?
There's not decided.
This side is much better.
Does that not work? So that gives you an opportunity to go down. Okay.
So it's very.
Well, especially out on the street.
Oh, yeah, the Ripley, you're going, but.
I'm good.
It's like,
Busy, running around.
And
Gets the things
You're
done.
hearing,
we went down there and
We only have one car.
it was a fun day.
looks like I'm looking in and seeing a video of Portrait of Ezra. I'm sure we'll see that later.
Mountains, like,
Not too bad.
it's all very far.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of we do by collaborating with people. So if I do travel, we travel like once or twice. And then they have the capacity of what's that? Yeah. And hopefully there's not that much of that. Or something that people that we're working with can do. So I basically train some people through, for example.
It's an air conditioning unit. It feels good. I have to admit.
She's the head of that library. She went back to school and got her librarian.
I'm not going to go through all this so you can read, but
Yeah, and just goes to my brain.
Oh, yeah.
So
Too much to
I
handle.
was very excited because basically since she's gotten the job, they've been in a tiny little space.
look at this picture of those albatrosses.
No, just with the library.
Unfortunately, I can't show them to you very well because of the reflection.
Yeah. How'd you get one? I didn't know she was selling them.
She only very limited because
Thank you so much.
No longer.
No, they can't do that.
So we're at the Stephanie and Peter Nolan Auditorium. I didn't know it was called that, but it is.
A little too small for my
It doesn't get in the way. Sure.
Give you a look at the room. It's an auditorium. I'm sure we'll see some of this later. And again, I would encourage during the presentation, use Cornell stream. It's probably going to be, assuming they don't have technical difficulties, it's probably going to be of a high quality because they're likely, if I don't know for certain, but they may have a wired connection or a better one than I have anyway. You know that song, Jump Around? They're beautiful. I probably shouldn't watch this because I might end up watching the Albatross cam too. What an elaborate dance.
It's crazy. It's funny, I've just been checking in on it at work, literally, right when it went offline. Like 8:43. Watching the stream out, and I was just like, oh. Well, I guess they just lost power. I mean, you can see it was moving around and nothing like tragic.
You know, I may change the way I do things. Maybe I'll use the other camera on the screen and this camera on the presenters. I don't know. Well, actually, I think this is all part of their presentation during the reception. So let's set you down and give you a steadier look. Well, we know this scene, don't we?
That was amazing that you managed to capture that.
That was lucky. That was that's Big Red and Ezra there.
Oh, yeah, that was something to watch.
What I like is the footwork we'll see in a moment.
So you're Ferris.
I'm Ferris.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth and I watch you.
Oh, nice to meet you.
I don't know how you can look at this with the other camera? And I'm thinking, how on earth? I see how you do it.
It's kind of a crazy, the whole day is crazy usually.
Yeah. Yeah, look at that. Oh, the tower went together. Look at it. Wow, look at that.
When she did that with E2, he wasn't quite so
I never saw that,
Oh,
but
that was so funny.
I think I'm gonna switch cameras, everybody.
So Carol was explaining,
I can't remember. Didn't Big Red end up with a? Yeah.
it kind of, something to do with them recommitting to each other. He didn't think it was all about the food.
I don't know. I mean, the food was there at the time. I don't know. I mean, I don't think we'll ever know. It certainly didn't look as if Big Red was happy when Ezra came along. So I don't know. Okay, everybody, we're gonna switch cameras.
Bird's eye view. Yeah.
Oops, I should have been recording.
I never realized that. What they could do with their feathers. Oh, the way they stick them. It's called Wesley the Story. Yeah. Wesley the Story of a Girl and His Owl by Stacey O'Brien. That's the book. It's about a barn owl that this biologist ended up taking care of practically from birth, and she wrote an amazing memoir. I mean, it's a human and a bird memoir, but it's now my favorite book. But she talked about how many different expressions and how the different parts of the bird's head or the facial muscles, how they could move them around in any number of expressions. Imagine being able to make your hair do that. No, I mean, nothing up there works like that.
That's where it gets gluten-free from mine's
Darkening just a little bit. I have to say, for whatever reason, didn't tend to get to see this sort of behavior. It was just my timing in terms of watching or whatever, but really, really beautiful. Darken it again, I think. I don't like the way it's coming lit.
Just because of proximity, and I can know where they're going, and there's a lot of price to know where they are. Whereas the hair and hair was someone's not to marry it, looking for fish or what, and I enjoyed
Like wood ducks.
Oh, I remember this. I really like the idea of investigating. That was so
Not today.
what the heck is that?
These are nests, many of these nests I have not watched. It's not that I have anything against them, just only so many you can devote to.
She got attacked by a eagle twice yesterday. She's in rehab right now. And then the eagle went after Steve too.
I'm not going to say the room is full, but the number of people seated and seem to be enjoying everything. In a way, this is a nice opportunity because you can only watch so many cameras. And for many people here, maybe they haven't tuned into all of these cameras and they get an opportunity to see things they haven't seen. I love the green herons. That sapsucker, apparently. Maybe you can see that. I'm not sure if you can see the small print at the bottom of the screen. You can see, though, as I mentioned earlier today, sometimes the green herons will make use of those lily pads. So, as slightly less than beautiful as they are, they can be useful. I think this is the Ontario. Did I hear Ontario foodie camp? I generally don't watch that one either, but that might be one that I should watch, just because they have species visiting it that ordinarily I don't see. So again, a lot of these are favorite moments that people have picked out.
I want to remind folks we're going to be giving away some like fun prizes at the end, but you got to name it. And we're gonna bug you with like spam and call your phone. No, I'm just kidding. If you're interested in winning, make sure you put one in before we start to do it. Basically, right after the talk, so that we can get the heck out of here. Get home, enjoy a nice evening. Okay. So it's about 6:35 right now, so we'll be looking to fire up your talk. Probably last around 45 minutes. Have some time for question and answer, and hopefully it's gonna be a beautiful night. Hopefully the stars will be out. We're gonna enjoy it. So just a reminder that that box is down there. Okay.
Waiting for it. Now eat. If you're hungry, you flew in. Eat.
Yes, it's D1. Yeah, he sings once in a while. He says it's D1. Really? And he calls it Isaiah. And he's making people better than really? Yeah, he says it's D1. He Well, no, there was one that did that. I know. But it says it's B1. They usually distribute it out.
Does anyone still want to do the door prize? Like a roller coaster start time, so just want to make sure everyone has a chance. Or what? Let me know. Let's go.
Go right in there. Well, I didn't win anything. Oh, it's all right. Yeah, I tried to find it.
It's a pretty ambitious project. This year we're going to start just with one.
To midnight.
They did a couple of minutes.
And this scene, great herons had rebuilt the nest. Any herons.
First we got to start small.
Well, that's the
Rebuilt the nest at Sapsucker. Nice to watch them again for a number of reasons.
I see that. That was the one that was money flying.
And we would have had better opportunities just because of the equipment that I have now. We would have had closer looks than we had had in the past. Every once in a while I'll see a photo that I've taken. It's one of the C's on Rice Hall. Anyway, every once in a while I'll see a photo I've taken of at Sapsucker with two nests there. And it's always like, well, those were the days. I remember that year when there were two great blue heron nests. One was a few weeks behind, 2 or 3 weeks behind the one that we were most accustomed to seeing. And the following year, the second pair, I guess, either didn't return, unless they were driven off by dead heron or something.
And say the cost of more than we're going to,
Hear a lot of nice things about your carving from people.
That's great.
This is the green heron we saw last year. They don't show the real close-ups that we got, but we had a nice look that day.
They want to know how people learn and how they engage in science and technologies like this.
So the discovery trail helps a lot.
Set you guys down for a minute, not the camera, my equipment. I'm going to walk away for a moment.
In the dark.
Oh, yeah.
A big red was seen on Rhodes Hall. Just had to get something to drink. You can see there's an inset for what's the view from outside.
Post a video of Julia once a week. Oh my God, she is.
Can you speak?
Remember, if you are interested in the raffle items, be sure to get your name into that little nest box, okay? Good. Still plenty of time. Good. Yeah. And I apologize. We really wanted to hold this lab, but all over the day, all over the migration filtration, all over the soil staff. And it wasn't an ability to like, oh, yet another event there.
Yes.
So, apologize, but it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, we're good.
No, it's not sweet.
Well, I was there before.
Yeah, you're trying to
Yeah.
Still adorable to see. Yeah, I never saw it, but it took place at Sarasota. Actually, that says 2016. I just tuned into the chat room, everybody. Hey, how are you? I think so. Oh, no problem. Victoria. This is not Sweetie, everybody. This is not Sweetie. So that apparently took place on April 28th, 2016. So like last year. What's going on is because that wing is extended, you know, nothing looks right. Not how you normally see a goose on the ground. I don't mean to comment. Clearly this mother is spoiling the children. It's, you know. Whether it's through the Cornell's cams, cams of others, we don't get to see a lot of special things if we tune in. You know, sometimes you have to take the time, and there's only so much time in the day to watch these cameras, but a lot of special things happen. I love that. Love that too. I remember that. He's really good. That's Sweetie. Before cameras like this located in there, you don't see these things. This is, if you think about it, this is amazing. Oh, I wasn't looking down at it. Look at the fish. Those chicks are cute. There's nothing cute about the adults. They're just elegant and beautiful. But the chicks are cute. Whoa! 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 Hey! I guess that's that.
Oh, bees.
So I'll just mention, once we get to 7 o'clock, we're going to start live streaming. And after the Q&A, we're going to do the door prizes. So if you want to be a part of that, stick around for that. That'll be after we finish the Q&A and close out the live stream. Just do that here before you all head out. So thanks for joining us. We'll be just a couple minutes more.
Maybe I shouldn't have moved away from the screen.
Check. Yeah, so I can see this is what the sound will sound like for people here and hopefully online. So Diego's going to check Check. So I can see this is what the sound will sound like for people here and hopefully online. So Diego's going to check Check. So I can see this is what the sound will. There you go. That sound. That's a good thing, right? So we're just going to go ahead. We're not ready for the talk. It's just I'm going to leave this for about 5 minutes before we're going to be starting. I'm just sort of setting this up for the online audience to be arriving.
So now the online audience can now hear audio and see what we're saying.
They can't hear us right now because I turned off the microphone.
So what I've decided to do, everybody, I think, and I guess they're going to have speakers, an inset on the screen, and they're streaming that live.
Yeah, so it's down here. And
they're going to be streaming everything live, from what I understand. So maybe via the live presentation or the streamed presentation, you'll see both the speakers and the various slides and things. I think I'm going to still try to record, and I'll record the screen as you're seeing it now, and I'll stream the screen as you're seeing it now. And I'm going to do, I think, with the other camera, more of a closer look at the speakers. So we'll see how that works. I may have to make adjustments once someone actually begins to speak. Okay? Okay. Before we do start, though, let's just give you a look what everything looks like. Not a million people here, but we have some people here. I'm just going to quickly go through. Oops. Just to show you how full the room is. It's almost 7 o'clock, so most people, I haven't looked outside in the reception area, but most of the people are already seated within. Then we're in orange. B25. Here's the Long Hall. As I said, you might be better off if you're watching. You might be better off just watching the Cornell stream. You'll probably get, I'm guessing, better quality. I don't know how good the video signal, how good the video is that's coming through my camera. And I'm sure you'll get like full screen.
If anybody does need the bathroom at some point, there's bathrooms just down the steps and to the right.
Just by the way things are shaped, I can't seem to get
And those are full,
the screen
50
to
meters down
fill
the
up
hall.
my own screen perfect. So. The other camera.
My name is Miyoko Chu. I'm the Senior Director of Communications at the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. And with me tonight are Charles Obermeyer, our BirdCams project leader, and Ben Walters on his way here. He's our BirdCams communications specialist. And we also have Victoria Campbell here, who worked with us on the BirdCams in the past and still with us at the lab in a different role. So we're really happy to have Victoria too. So thank you so much for joining us, whether you're here with us on campus tonight or whether you're tuning in on the live stream. You are a community and a family to us, and we really cannot thank you enough for the engagement and the support that you've given us. What we see happening on the BirdCams is really extraordinary. It's extraordinary not only because we can see into the lives of birds in ways that are so often beautiful and revelatory, but also because the emergent discoveries, conservation impacts, and community interactions are really something larger than any of ourselves. In the next hour, we'd like to share with you our appreciation for that phenomenon and take a look ahead to the future. So after the talk, we'll invite your questions and your comments, and we'll probably alternate between the audience here in the auditorium and our live streaming audience. So that, Charles.
Great. As usual, those of you who've ever watched a cam, the live chat, know that often you're trying to watch the cam and do something else in the live chat all at the same time. So welcome tonight. And just to echo really what Miyoko said, it's really fun, the times that we've had the opportunity to get together in real life, IRL, as the young kids say these days. And really tonight we thought we'd capitalize on the fact Migration Celebration was here in town today. How many of you actually went to Migration Celebration as well? So for those of you online, nearly every hand in this room went up. Now, Migration Celebration is a day-long event that happens over at the Lab of Ornithology. To just try and let you guys know how much we do appreciate you and appreciate what we've done, where we've been, and together, and talk about hopefully ways we're going to continue to move together in the future. So, as you're all obviously aware, but I can't make my screen, there we go. as I just was posting in the chat, technical glitches are the things that make life interesting. If everything always worked, it wouldn't be that much fun. So cams take us into the lives of birds across the hemisphere. And for the first time in history, we've been able to see what happens 24/7. As you all know, thanks to the live streaming technology that we use, and the fact that viewers are always watching. Some of you, I know, you watch. We have some of our 100, percenters in the room today that have watched probably everything that's ever happened on a cam. And one viewer tuned in and told us that watching the cams is a little bit like doing field biology in their own living room. And we all really liked that idea about how watching a cam is a little bit like doing field biology, and a lot of us have been field biologists in the past. The crazy thing is the cams take it one step further. Field biology, you almost never get a pretty view, a nice tight view like you get on a camera. You also, though, on a camera don't get to see everything that's happening around it. So that tension between those two things often drives a lot of what we talk about on the cams and what we learn from each other sort of thinking about and questioning. So the images up on screen here are from cameras that we've streamed either by ourselves or with collaborators over the last 12 months. You probably recognize a lot of these species, and if you don't, you're going to see probably some highlight clips throughout this talk, and we'll give you a little bit of an example. So more than 1 million people tune into the cams each year, and over the last 6 years, that means millions of people have watched. Collectively, we've been watching these cameras for about 4,000 years worth of time. Okay, we're talking Egypt, right? We're talking pyramids. We're talking that just in these 6 years, just on our cams. We're not talking the cameras, all the other cameras that are out there. So imagine that impact. People learning about the natural world. And we're not just watching. As we found out very early, people like to communicate about what they're seeing. And we get emails, tweets, Facebook posts, live chats, people talking to each other, people talking to us all talking together. And it's a crazy new medium for understanding the world. And then some people even decided they wanted to spend more time volunteering. And we really wanted to thank all the volunteers who helped make this cam experience what it has been over the years, whether that's leading chats, tweeting out your observations, operating the cameras, as well as the birders on the ground that spent so much of their time following around the birds and finding out what happens to them off camera. So if you'd like, if you're here in the room and you've ever volunteered, you're a birder on the ground, if you'd like to stand up, just let everybody know. I'm not going to make anybody stand up. And if you're out there in the chat, please feel free to give a shout out so we know you're out there too.
Volunteers, birders on the ground, we'd love you to stand up and wave.
Yeah, some of these people hundreds of birds and for those of you online, we had a nice group of people standing up in here, and some of them had to be dragged up. So, and really what's brought us, one way that we kind of thought about this talk is just science, discovery, conservation, community, these themes that keep on bubbling up every time we have a camera or a conversation. But it all kind of starts with that magic moment of being able to see birds up close without disturbing them. We're drawn in by the surprising, delightful, and unexpected scenes that just unfurl in front of us. And what I love about this clip of the great horned owl in Savannah, Georgia, is some of you might know that great horned owls make a threat display. She's basically right now posturing to a bald eagle that flew by. If you heard earlier in the clip, you can hear one call and then she popped up. But if you've ever been on the receiving end of one of these threat displays, you always see it from the other side, because they're pointing at you, and they have these bright yellow eyes, and everything is super camouflaged, tiger of the skies. Yet, in this video, which seems to have just stalled, let's see, should get to the point where you can see her eyes when she comes around, but you'll have to trust me on this. She turns around, and you can see her bright yellow eyes. It worked great in the warm-ups. So that unknown, just even like now, without disturbing them, getting to see things from a different view. We're also fortunate to be able to see natural behaviors completely unscripted. I had always known that albatrosses performed these elaborate ritual dances as part of courtship.
This is pretty amazing.
But the first time I saw it live, I'll never forget that. then I got to keep watching it every year that we've run this albatross camera. And I've never once gotten tired watching it. The neat thing is it's 6 hours or 5 hours shifted from our time. We'll get the kids to bed, we'll be sitting down after a long day of doing whatever in the middle of winter when it's been dark for hours and hours, and sit down and I can flip this on, and every once in a while, like, two birds come walking in, the grass is green, the sun is shining, everything is beautiful, and these birds are dancing for you. They don't even know we're watching. So I know they're not actually dancing for me, they're dancing for each other. And that's a really neat feeling. Especially when you think about how long-lived these birds are, the longest-lived species that we know that's still breeding in their 60s, they can get up to. And it takes them a long time to master that. So watching these birds practice endlessly, or reinforce a bond, almost endlessly on cameras, is an amazing experience. We get to see touching scenes, like this shot of Ezra presiding over the hatching of one of the eggs back in 2015. I think it was the only time when he was there when it was actually hatching. And unlike Big Red, who was a great umbrella of blocking the camera, this is the first time we really got to see this scene, and Ezra's the one that let us see it by stepping to the side. We had never seen it in such detail. We never looked at sort of this interaction between the adult bird and a young one hatching out. And also that juxtaposition between this incredibly efficient predator that can tear a bird to shreds, how gentle it can be. And we'd see that time and time again as these birds fed their young, tearing off just the right size piece of meat to feed them. And even one of our super common birds in North America, the American robin, was captivating when we just took the time to watch it. This was a camera we were able to set up very quickly this spring, nesting on the building. And everybody knows that they eat worms, but I don't think people knew much about something called fecal sacs. And it was a really fun conversation to have with people. So we knew they ate worms, but this happens in lots of passerine birds, and it's a great opportunity to talk about why it happens, why they're eating them, what was that? We had someone ask if they were why were the babies laying eggs? Why were the adults eating them? And that's a perfectly reasonable way to look at what's happening, So this natural world that we're able to watch all together just winds up generating all of these shared observations and conversation starting points. And away from the nests, we also got to watch a spectacular assemblage of birds at the variety of feeders that we have cameras on, as in this clip from the West Texas Hummingbird Camp. And this camera gave us all tons of identification challenges. You've got a dozen species, you've got different aged birds, different sex birds. Some of them look very similar to each other. And it was just a reminder to me of how much diversity there was in all corners of the world. Because when I landed in El Paso to install this camera, it's about 3.5 hours away from El Paso, you would not expect there to be a bunch of life living around there. It looks barren, it's desert. But you get up a little bit into the mountains, a little bit of water, and it turns out there's hummingbirds streaming through there during migration. And to be able to sit there and watch, right as a researcher is basically studying these birds, seeing the bands on their feet, it's really neat. And crazily, this camera last year had the very first record of an amethyst-throated hummingbird for the entire United States. Just happened to fly to our camera down in West Texas. So you never know what's going to be around the corner. So it all comes back to this idea that anyone can make a new discovery any day, especially when it comes to watching species that haven't been well studied before. This was a green and white hummingbird nest in the hill, basically right below Machu Picchu. And it's actually a fairly common species in that part of Peru, but it's never actually been described. It's breeding. And so in this clip, you're going to see the first time anyone's ever watched one of these guys fledge. That moment of fledging. And about an hour later, the other one fledged as well. But nobody knew how long they stayed in the nest even. Nobody knew how many feedings it took. And between the recordings we made and the observations that were shared with us from viewers, we're able to describe this, and hopefully we're going to publish this at some point in the future. And even watching common species like the great blue heron yielded routine surprises. And these are events that field biologists will rarely see because they happen infrequently or they happen at night. So this is actually seen at 3 in the morning You have this camera that was great. It could use starlight to give you a nice color image in the middle of the night. And in the middle of the night, a great horned owl swooped in and attacked this incubating heron. So let me play the clip here. Oh, sounds up. Right? Has anyone ever doubted that birds have evolved from dinosaurs, right? To me, the juxtaposition of this bird that you think of as being stately and elegant and a master fisherman turning into this, crazed defender of, in this case, her nest, all puffed up. The rage almost that you can imagine being in that call. And that was a call that we don't even have a recording of in the Macaulay Library of Sounds and Video. And when I woke up at 5:30 in the morning, I had emails and phone calls waiting for me because someone had been watching, okay? And we might have missed this. If we're scanning through footage very quickly, it's possible you could have missed this because it literally happened in 15 seconds, So between the people watching everywhere and the technology allowing us to watch everywhere, we capture these things often in the middle of the night that surprise us. Another surprise, this was playing in the reel at the start, was on our Texas barn owl camera. One night, it's looking like there's kind of a lag in the playing of the clip. So you can see in the upper left corner there is a view of the outside of the box. And, upper right corner. And a snake, a rat snake, attempted to come in and predate the nestlings. And we can see this because of infrared lights, but those lights are invisible to the birds. Okay, so this is happening in essentially pitch black. There may have been a moon that night, so maybe there's a little bit of light that managed to find its way into this box. But she knows something's there, and you can see that snake now coming down towards the entrance. And in a flash, she is able to hone in on that snake and evict it from her nest, all in the dark. And no one can actually go along with a barn owl as it hunts and sort of see the world through its eyes. But technology like this and the opportunity to see it actually gives us a sense of at least what their ability is. That this bird in near darkness can just pinpoint accuracy hit that snake. It was just, to me, mind-boggling. And last year, a viewer even spotted a flatworm descending into the burrow of the Bermuda petrel on the petrel cam, the cow cam. And this happened again in the middle of the night. And you might not think much about a flatworm, but it turns out there are some flatworms that will eat flesh. And that this could have been, for a bird for which there are only a few hundred of in existence in the world, and every aspect of the management revolves around making sure these birds that are in the burrows have the opportunity to fledge. We were able to the next morning. Literally, first thing, got our collaborators down in Bermuda on the phone, talked to them about the risk in this. They said, this could be bad for the chick. We were able to go back and review the footage. And we were able to actually see that small little flatworm just land and then make its way out the burrow. It actually wasn't at least interested in the nestling. It's the first time that's ever been seen in these burrows by biologists. So now they're aware of it. And that's another one of those kind of occurrences that would be very hard to see if we were just scanning the footage kind of quickly for major events that might be happening. So human eyes, your eyes out there, amazing resource for people like us and you trying to understand what's happening. Sort of thinking a little bit more about this idea of being a field biologist in their own living room. Thousands of people spend untold hours living the life of a land-scale mannequin researcher, patiently watching a branch most of the time until a male or female arrived and a flurry of activity followed. And people watched this enough that they got the ability, at some point to realize when things were different than what should be sort of quote unquote normally happening. Why are these two males spending so much time sort of aggressively jumping at each other, right? And they write out and ask, this is what normally happens when they're there. And it turns out on this display perch was this little bit of a power struggle unfolding across the whole year, where there's a beta and an alpha individual there, but another, presumably, bird that thinks it's an alpha was trying to sort of edge in on this display territory and possibly take it over. So we don't know what's going to happen next year. These birds tend to live a long time, they don't migrate, so hopefully we'll get an opportunity to see these same birds next year and see what they're doing. And then, in addition to sharing these really infrequent events, viewers also showed that you could really comprehensively chronicle all the details needed to sort of draw a very detailed picture of what's happening. A prime example of this was prey deliveries on the Cornell Hawks cam. For those of you who don't, I think probably most people here know where the Cornell Hawks nest, but it's literally about 300 meters that way, 250 meters that way, along one of the parking lots that we showed you on the map where you could park. So we knew that you knew they'd be bringing prey to the nest, and we knew they're like chipmunks, but even when we know that, sometimes something unexpected happens in those prey deliveries. So in this case, there's a live chipmunk brought back. Maybe he played dead. I don't think he realized that he was 95 feet up in the air. And if my memory serves me right, well, the clip was supposed to go about 3 seconds longer. Both adults dive off after the chipmunk, and he's brought back up a few minutes later. So even though we knew that it would bring chipmunks, it was kind of a neat thing to see. And one of the ways we found out about that is on Twitter. So for the first couple of years, a lot of this information was being shared on Twitter, and you can see here on the left side, here's somebody tweeting about that live chipmunk being brought to the nest, as well as some other chipmunk deliveries down there. So for the first 2 years, we had actually a very comprehensive timeline just in our Twitter timeline of what was being brought. And then that evolved in the third year into a cloud-hosted spreadsheet that had auto-completing totals. It's totally volunteer-led. Totally community overseen. It wasn't us. We said simply, I remember saying it'd be great to get a little bit more information about what's coming to the nest, and a little bit more easier, because I have to go through the Twitter timeline and pull all that information out. And when there's maybe 4,000 tweets, it just takes a long time. And this was all done by the community. And just to point out too, if you look down there in the bottom right, one of those food deliveries was pizza for Carl and Baguette. That's why I love this screenshot. So they were there doing some live streaming, and even the prey deliveries to them got chronicled sometimes. But what we were able to do with that is actually then start to look at this information. It doesn't exist in this form in the literature. Nobody has a census from 4 years from the same two birds with the same number of young that all fledged successfully. And so just, we were able to start looking at the data and saying, okay, well, what patterns are we seeing? So in this chart here, we have there's 4 different panels there, 2012, 13, 14, and 15 from top to bottom. On the y-axis on the left side here is the prey mass. So we use sort of standardized masses for each of the prey items that they would bring. And then along the x-axis is the season day. So starting from the first day of each year, going all the way until fledge. Till the first fledge. And the green bars are Big Red, and the blue ones are Ezra. And so what you can see, number one, if you look at Ezra's contributions across the years, it's amazingly consistent. You see blue every day pretty much at a particular level. It's around 400, often between 400 and 600 grams of food brought per day. And then you see sometimes these big peaks that often involve really good pigeon hunting or rabbit hunting. But that changes each year. There's no totally even way that it's described each year. We can also look at, how much total did each of them contribute? So again here, the green is Big Red and the blue is Ezra, but you can see that Ezra some years accounted for almost 81% of the prey mass brought to the nest. Okay? And we can break that down a different way. We can look at what kinds of prey were being brought. And then these ones at the bottom, those big purple wedges, that's the only one I'm going to talk about right now, but those are chipmunks. Okay? And I thought this was a really interesting thing. Catch 100 chipmunks, how many are you going to catch the next year? About half. Catch 120? What are you going to catch the next year? About half. And I don't know if that's reflecting changes in the chipmunk populations, but you can definitely imagine that impacting them. And so even a chipmunk researcher might actually be interested in these kind of data because they show just one pair of hawks, what they're able to pull out of the environment. And so we're working on continuing to summarize these data. I actually gave a talk about this at the North American Ornithological Conference last year in Washington, D.C. And we're hoping to prepare a manuscript for publication so that other scientists can learn from all of the effort that the community has undertaken over the years. And in the same way that you've gotten to have a taste of field biology from your own living room, you've also gotten the chance to converse and interact with people studying these birds. And so being able to ask questions, share observations through live question and answer sessions. So we talked at the top there, biologists working with California condors, studying small birds and nests, as well as ospreys out in Montana. And each of these opportunities, those experts also really looked forward to. It was a great way to learn what people are questioning and wanting to know. And so we hope to continue to do more of those in the future because we get a lot of great feedback from people that they like them. And so thank you guys for just being such great participants in those question and answer sessions. I think I'm going to have Ben come up and take over from here.
Thank you, Charles, and just wanted to take a moment to thank everybody else here for coming this evening and joining us online. I've been with Bird Camps Project for just over a year now, and it's been the most overwhelmingly positive experience that I could ever imagine. Being a part of viewing the lives of these birds as well as a part of the community as well. So I have to thank everyone for that. Well, we know that these birds show us so much through their impacts on science and the discoveries that we see through watching the cams. But one of the most striking revelations that we have is being exposed to their intimate lives and just the determination that they have to survive and raise their young in the face of so many challenges. The reality is that birds face challenges all the time, whether it's through predation, through low food availability, harsh weather conditions, and even things that are like human-caused threats. And the risks are even greater during the breeding season when they're trying to raise their young. And there's really no better example of this than back in 2012 when we all watched a blizzard roll through Ithaca and roll through Sapsucker Woods on our heron cam. We just see in this time lapse that the snow is building up and up and up and almost covering the female heron as she's incubating her eggs. But what do we see? She just gets up, shakes it off, sits right back down, doing what comes natural, doing what she's determined to do, and that's keep her eggs warm for the next, to give them a chance at life. So we witness these type of things all the time on the camps, and the bird's ability to persevere in the face of difficulty is really inspiring. And along that same vein, I'm sure many of you are familiar with this moment. It's often referred to as the dad umbrella moment on our Cornell Hawks camp. This was when, during a April rainstorm, Ezra actually zoomed up to the nest to shelter Big Red and their eggs and young hatchlings. All of the eggs hadn't hatched out yet. And you can see that this amazing moment brought us all a little shelter together, and it's something that we can all really be inspired by. Not only the devotion between a mate and his partner, but also the devotion of the parents to their young in the nest. And this was no short rainstorm. They were hunkered down here for about 30 minutes, keeping their eggs warm and sheltered from the cold weather. But we also know that natural conditions can sometimes be too powerful to overcome. There's no better instance than back in 2015 on our Hellgate Osprey camp in Missoula, Montana, when a sudden and powerful hailstorm came raining through Hellgate Canyon. And you can see these devoted parents, Stanley and Iris, Osprey parents, sheltering their eggs in this boiling hailstorm. It's amazing just to watch how powerful it was. But ultimately, it was too much of a and unfortunately all of their eggs became damaged, and it ended their chances for the breeding season that year. But what it didn't stop us from watching. We continued to watch the ospreys. They rebuilt their nest from this hailstorm. They stayed together through the rest of the breeding season in Hellgate. And then they eventually kept interacting, bringing fish to the nest. They kept reinforcing their pair bond despite this loss that they faced during the breeding season. And their resilience in this case is really something that resonated with all of us in the community. We also know that the challenges that these birds face aren't always from nature. Sometimes they come from the impacts that humans have on their environment. And while we're sticking in Hellgate Canyon, we know that ospreys, when they're building their nest, they collect all sorts of things. They bring sticks, moss, pine cones, greenery, but sometimes they also bring man-made materials like baling twine, fishing wire, synthetic netting. And these are all things that can be very dangerous to the ospreys themselves and their chicks, especially if they get tangled up. So, lo and behold, Louis, the male on the osprey canyon this year, did just that. He brought in some synthetic netting to the Hellgate nest. But because our birds are so lucky to be on cam and have such a wonderful community surrounding them, we were alerted within the minute that it happened by both our volunteers and our community members that are watching. And here you can actually see that we were allowed to, we were able to contact our partners, the Montana Osprey Project, who work with the Hellgate camp, and they were able to get out a lift and up in the nest within hours to remove this obstruction and help the ospreys continue to breed, or continue to start building their nests that year. And through the community's growing support and awareness of these problems, there's a real inspiring message here that not only have you helped birds like these, but it also helps projects like the Montana Osprey Project, continuing to address issues like baling twine and promoting awareness throughout western Montana and the country. Many viewers were also a bit confused during the first year of our Laysan albatross cam on Kauai, when a young albatross named Kaloa Kalua actually regurgitated a bolus of indigestible material on camera, and it contained over 30 pieces of plastic. And you can see here is the bolus that the young bird regurgitated, and it contains some squid beaks, which are sort of natural indigestible material that they regurgitate naturally. But we also see up to 30 different shaped pieces of plastic and pollution that their parents picked up in the ocean. And the possibility of plastics and trash even being an issue for the species that spends nearly their entire lives over the Pacific Ocean foraging was a new concept to a lot of people. They didn't realize just how much plastic is in our oceans and that seabirds even went to ingest it. And even though researchers are still trying to understand the impact that these plastics actually have on this species, we know that it's estimated that up to 5 tons of plastic are being accidentally fed to their nestlings on Midway Atoll, where the majority of the breeding population of the Laysan albatross breed every year. And after learning about this hazard on cam, it really hit home for a lot of us in the community. Some viewers wrote in about swearing off plastic. They wanted to know, how do we stop this problem, or what can I personally do to help these albatross? And through everyone's observation, we started to ask questions, we started to get feedback from one another in the community, and viewers across the world started becoming part of the solution just by watching these cams. One viewer even wrote in that it's literally changed their lives learning about the plastic pollution problem in our oceans. And nowhere does this reality of the risk of a man-made environment become clearer than with our own Cornell Hawks here on campus. As I'm sure most of you are aware, in multiple years, as you can see, many juvenile hawks have been injured or killed due to collisions or interactions with other man man-made hazards on campus. And this all sadly eventually culminated with Ezra's collision injury and death earlier this year, right before the breeding season. And we've learned together and prepared for this reality that most juvenile hawks don't live past the first year. But understanding the causes of why it happens, seeing it play out through the efforts of the camera and of our community, our birders on the ground who have tracked and followed these birds on a daily basis, it really drove home this topic for all of us. And now, what we're showing here is a bit of a haunting image. This is actually a collision from the juvenile G3 back in 2016 when it struck a window of the bus shelter on the right here. And you can actually see the imprint that it left on the shelter with its feathers and its bill down at the bottom. Window strikes are estimated to kill 599 million birds in the United States alone each year. And however, the good news is that making windows safer is an easy thing to do and something that any of us can do, anybody in the community, anybody around the world. And many people are now helping to raise awareness because of what they've seen watching the cam and learning about this hazard in the community. One viewer wrote that with the death of G3, everyone started researching bird strikes and helping to learn options to prevent them. This particular event led to an effort to research the best ways to mitigate the risk that these actual bus shelters had to our hawks on campus. And thanks largely in part to the help of our birders on the ground, Carl and Cindy, both shelters near the hawk nest were fitted with rather stylish design of bird tape. And it was applied according to the most recent research on how to reduce collisions. And before this all happened just weeks after the collision and before the next season was upon us, making sure that these shelters no longer pose a risk on campus. However, we know that there is still a lot of work to do. Since birds on campus and in these urban environments come in contact with these windows and hazards on a daily basis at every turn, we know that from this event, the hawks have become an ambassador for our education. They showed us why it's important to do more and what we can actually do to help. Also, in some instances, we know that the birds on cam are actually a member of a species that's faced challenges for years, including even being driven to the brink of extinction, like our California condor here on the California condor cam. And it's really interesting because it's a species that continues to require ongoing management, even in order to maintain just a sustainable population in Southern California, Arizona, Utah, and Baja, Mexico. In fact, the cameras that we use to show the condor cam are actually utilized by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and their partners at Santa Barbara Zoo and everybody at the Condor Recovery Program to monitor these nestlings as part of a nest management strategy in order to increase condor nesting success in the Southern California population on the condor cam. And in 2016, last year on cam, tens of thousands of viewers actually got to witness the nesting of one of these magnificent birds. And they saw firsthand the opportunity to learn the backstory of how much effort it actually takes for these birds to succeed in the wild. The Cofer's Ridge pair, who was on our cam last year, had laid an egg and successfully incubated for about 2 months' time. And it was about a week away from hatching. We were just about to launch the cam. And the egg disappeared from the cavity overnight. It was likely taken by a predator, but because we were watching, luckily, biologists were able to rush into the nest site and insert a fake egg in order to keep the adults interested in incubating. And it actually worked. Then the biologists would return to replace the fake egg with a captive laid egg from the captive breeding program at just the right stage before hatch. So, let's take a ride with these condor biologists in this clip from 2016. We watch them descend into the nest cavity. The adult flies out they come in and replace this dummy egg with one that's just about ready to hatch. And this is really amazing. The female enters right after the biologist leaves, and it resulted in a net positive for both the adults and the possibility for the chick within that egg to add to the wild population. In the same vein, we all glimpsed into the otherworldly burrow nest of the Bermuda petrel on our Bermuda petrel cam this year on Nonsuch Island, Bermuda. This is one of the world's rarest seabirds, and in fact it was even thought to be extinct for over 300 years before nesting populations were discovered in 1951. And now that they're clinging to survival, it's only thanks to the Bermuda government, the biologists working every day, tracking the nesting populations, the nonprofit organizations, and the people in the community just like you who are bringing awareness to this bird and learning about their struggle to survive. We often watched as the nesting on cam was checked upon by Bermuda Department of Natural Resources Terrestrial Conservation Officer Jeremy Medeiros, who manages the entire breeding population of this species. And his work ensures that each chick has the best likelihood to survive and have the opportunity to fledge and become part of this breeding population. And we all eventually cheered a little bit wistfully when it climbed out of the burrow for the last time and fledged over the Atlantic Ocean, where it would spend the next 3 to 4 years of its life only to return back to Nonsuch to try breeding for the first time. So here's just one of those clips where one of the many times Jeremy came in to check on the petrel, just a little fluff ball this time. He actually opens up the top of a man-made burrow, which the petrels nest in. And these are really exciting times because we got to see the birds in natural light. And he would actually pick it up out of the burrow and explain as he took measurements and told us about how the development of the chick was going. And gave us sort of a time frame when we would expect it to fledge or when we would expect it to lose its needle down. This was really cute little fluff balls. So, as we mentioned earlier, one of the most powerful aspects of bird cams is that they allow people from around the world to share in very real experiences shown on these cams. These experiences not only not only build connections between all types of people, but also all over the world. And I'm just going to show you a quick photo, or a quick video here. And many of these experiences are shared back with us as well, including this 6th grade class whose teacher featured the red-tailed on cams in class. And in this clip, they're watching the very same clip we showed you with Ezra and his new hatchling earlier in this talk. I'll just let you watch.
Oh, he is so close.
So it's so amazing seeing all those young people excited about birds and science, and their excitement is truly infectious when you get to have those things from the community shared back with us. The experiences with these birds also inspire people in many different ways. As Charles mentioned earlier, it makes people inspired by volunteering their time, but also by expressing themselves through art, poetry, and literature. As you can see, we've received just an outpouring of art throughout the years, across all of our camps from people of all ages expressing their love for birds and looking to give back through their spirit of community. And over again, we've also been touched by the passion and generosity of viewers, such as David Cohen, who's here tonight. You may have seen this Ezra, for those of you who are here, you may have seen this Ezra sculpture out in the lobby earlier. It's absolutely amazing. And also Karen Lobel-Fried, who created this block print of Leis and Albatross as part of her book that's inspired by the Leis and Albatross titled A Perfect Day for an Albatross. Both artists have decided generously to sell these works and donate the proceeds to support bird camps. And we'll definitely share more information about these works on our bird camp's website in the coming weeks for those of you who aren't here tonight. For those of you who are here, you can also see the pieces themselves out there for more information. And of course, we're also very grateful for the gifts of our birders on the ground, or our bogs, who have spent countless hours outside on campus with the Cornell Hawks, tracking them, updating the community about their adventures through photography, through live streaming, through different blog posts. And we've asked them all to share one of their favorite captures or memories throughout the years with everyone tonight. Carl and Cindy Sedlacek, who probably spent one of the most times following Big Red and Ezra over the years on campus together. They are so dedicated that they also blog about the birds and do a live stream with the community about the hawks when they follow them around campus. They shared this striking image of Big Red and Ezra with their red tails fanned out for everyone to see when Ezra greets Big Red atop a post as they shared time hunting together in the Cornell plantations. Christine Bogdanowitz on the right, who's collected a jaw-dropping gallery of photos of the hawks over the years, shared this moment of Ezra when he seemed as if he was just posing for the camera for her in front of an ivy-covered wall on Cornell campus. Ferris Akel, who also conducts a weekly live stream from our Sapsucker Woods, and is also live streaming tonight. Thank you, Ferris. Shared his experiences with the hawks have taught him that there's an entirely new and beautiful world right here on campus with the birds, if we only take the time to sit and look. And Suzanne and Wedge Horning, who are always counted on for an update with the hawks on campus. They recalled a family moment that they shared with Ezra and G2 during a squirrel hunt. And we often hear from community members not only about what they learn about the birds on camp, but how the birds experiences teach them about their own lives. Here, we see that one camp watcher's respect for all creatures on Earth here is grown by watching the camps. One faithful osprey watcher says that ospreys are so resilient, if they can get through what they do, then we can do the same. And one viewer even found a little zen moment from watching the Cornell feeders and learned how to be calm and quiet during a busy day. And one viewer even wrote in saying, "Thank you for the wonderful view of these great birds. I'm 81 years old, and you've given me a view I never dreamed I would see before." And the views from these cameras are views that none of us would have ever seen from this perspective before. And it is an experience that really binds us all together, sharing what happens with these birds. And we know that one thing is for sure, is that the camps provide a keyhole into the most intimate times of these birds' lives. They show us a whole new perspective on nature. They teach us things about our own lives. They also can be counted on for a surprising revelation or even a glimpse into the unknown at times. It's an idea that's been captured in a simple refrain from our Hawk Camp community, and that's look up. As a tribute to Ezra's legacy, many of you and many people in the community have donated funds to create an educational panel for a new sustainability trail on campus that's scheduled to go up later this year. Our design director is currently working on the panel to share the inspiration about bird life, sustainability on campus, and the message from our Hawk Camp community, look up. So we hope someday soon we'll all have a chance to witness that in person. And speaking of looking up, let's start looking ahead. I'm going to pass it off to Miyoko, and she's going to tell us a little bit about the future of the campus.
Okay, well, thanks, Ben and Charles. It was all beautifully said and presented. And I really hope that all of you who've joined us tonight feel as inspired as I do about the power that these CAMs have with discovery, conservation, and community. It actually inspired our team to work during the last 2 years to really envision how we could build on this incredible momentum by connecting viewers and scientists to work even more closely together on unraveling new discoveries. And so I'm thrilled to let you know that just last month, we received a major grant from the National Science Foundation to do just that. And it was a collaborative effort from the start because thousands of you actually responded to a survey that we put out asking you questions about your interest in participating in science through the CAMs. And so we used that information in our proposal. The 3-year grant will help us build tools and support for what we call co-created research, which really means investigations that the community and the scientists conduct together, all the way from asking questions to figuring out what's needed to answer those questions to pursuing the answers. So this differs from traditional citizen science projects in which participants typically would collect data for the scientists to use. And instead, we'll be asking you, the community, to pose the questions, and the scientists will collaborate with you to bring your investigations from start to finish. So the Labs web team is going to need to build some new tools so that in addition to not only viewing the CAMs and being able to chat about them as you can now, that we'll be able to actually let you comment on footage, tagging the footage in a way that they become data for us. To be able to bring those data out in ways that we can analyze them, and tools for you to be able to visualize the data online as well. So that will all be layered on top of the wonderful CAM experience that we already have, but that will enable those who want to go deeper with the science. There will be a new kind of opportunity for public participation in science, and it'll generate discoveries not only about birds, but also about ways of supporting questions and investigations that are driven by communities. So in the coming months, we'll share more information about this project with you. We invite you to work with us as we develop it, hatch it, and grow it. By working with you, we hope to chart an even richer way to collaborate across living rooms around the world. And so in closing, Charles, Ben, and I want to express our heartfelt thanks to you, our community, for being co-creators in our CAM experience, past, present, and future. And we really look forward to continuing the adventure with you. Thank you. So with that, we are happy to open up for questions and or comments, even if you just want to share something. We'll alternate between in-person and live-streamed audiences.
Are there any questions here? No? Okay. Does anybody have any questions or reactions to tonight? Burning questions. Yeah, go ahead.
I will that I haven't watched these webcams, so I'm curious what happened with the condor.
With last year with the egg replacement? Yeah, it's a great question because so the question was what happened with last year's condor. We showed the footage of the egg being replaced and just all the effort that goes into it. And that bird did make it to successfully fledge, but unfortunately died soon after. and that sort of underscores the challenge of being a wild animal. These birds they take a long time to become adept at what they do. It takes them a long time just to grow. We're talking, months and months of growing time. When they do start taking those first flights, they can find themselves in a position that's not great to be in, or just not necessarily recognizing that there's a threat. And in this case, it looked like it may have been predated by something. Because the crazy thing is, biologists have transmitters on these birds and they can track them. And the way that works is if a bird doesn't move for like 8 hours or 12 hours, it'll send off a different kind of signal to alert you that this bird might not be well. And so it was a very quick turnaround, but even by the time they got there, the bird was scavenged to the point where it was hard to necessarily know exactly what happened. But on the plus side, you can call it the plus side, I guess, the bird died, but as compared to what happened the year before, which actually the bird died on that one as well, lead was the primary reason 2 years ago the condor fledge didn't make it. Lead's a continuing issue for condors because condors only eat dead things. Dead things sometimes are riddled with lead bullets. And lead bullets for hunting aren't outlawed in all of California and Arizona, just within very small ranges that the condors actually can travel widely outside of. And so at some point between when it was checked on at 4 months and when it fledged at around 6 months, it was delivered a near, essentially lethal dose of lead that really made it unable to survive that fledging process. But this year's bird is looking great. Devil's Gate. So I encourage everyone to tune in. It's been spending a lot of time in front of the camera stretching its 10-foot long wings. So really excited to hopefully, because all it's going to take is one to make it. We'll actually have an individual that we'll be able to follow for potentially, maybe not the rest of our lives, but, for quite a long time. 20, 30 years wouldn't be uncalled for. Is there one from the audience, Miyoko? Just want to make sure.
Come up and share a comment.
Okay. And then we'll go to you next.
So online audience, if you had any questions, please feel free to put them into the chat. We didn't have any questions that I saw yet, but we had a really nice comment. And it's one that I wanted to share with all of you and to preface it by saying that educators around the world have done so much to bring these cams into their classrooms and to engage their students with it. We hear a lot of feedback from students about how much their students love it. And so this comment, I think, echoes a little bit of what goes on in the classroom. And I want to thank Mohawk for posting this in the chat. My 7th graders have watched the cams since 2014. They often mention the hot cam in their graduate presentations. I just put the cam up on the active board when they arrived in homeroom each morning. It served as a backdrop throughout the day. We did math and science lessons via a hatch chart for the 2016 G group. So thanks to all the educators out there who are doing things like this on a daily basis.
That's great. Do you have a question?
2 parts, actually. I don't know if you said already, but how do you decide where a camp is going to be? And I'm sure you ask all the time, because there's going to be another barn aisle.
Okay. Yeah, so the 2 questions are how do we decide on where, what cams we stream, and also whether or not there's going to be another barn owl cam. And I can certainly take the first one first. We're a really small team here. There's actually 2 people that work full-time. It's Ben and I. We work with a team of great people that do a lot of other things along with helping us with this project. And so a lot of our camera opportunities have really come through collaborations with people who have figured out they either have a camera already on a species. For example, the Hellgate Osprey cam initially had a camera on that osprey nest. They reached out to us to help with the live streaming, the messaging, and working together to build a greater impact for that camera. Sometimes it's purely a stroke of luck. That robin nested right outside a window where there was an active internet port, right that guy there in the eBird shirt in the middle of the room there was his office that I put the wire in through the window. Thank you very much. And we were able to very rapidly do that because I had an extra camera sitting around, and the robins are really resilient bird that lives near people. We didn't have a lot of things to worry about. But in some things like the condor cam, it took 4 years of working with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to finally get that online. Same thing with the albatross cam. That was like 3 years of working with the Quiet Albatross Network to find the right spot that had broadband internet. So a lot of it just comes down to logistics. We need internet and we need power, and we don't have the time or funding to really do a whole lot of research and development on how to like think way outside the envelope. You want to talk about barn owls? You want me to?
I can start out.
Yeah, go for it.
So I've definitely communicated with a lot of the folks about the barn owl cam that was retired last year after a hard 2016 season. And we are currently searching for new opportunities for the cam. Definitely some of the things we want to make sure we have with a species like the barn owl, who is so high risk and prone to starvation and problems with low food availability on cam. We want to have a researcher or some sort of barn owl expert to actually be a partner with on a cam, on our next cam that we're planning. So we've been researching it, and we certainly want to do that for the community because we know the barn owl cam has inspired so many people, so many great questions, and had such a high following that we definitely want to do that for the community. It's just finding that perfect spot to have a good relationship with someone who can really provide sort of a scientific background to what's going on with the cam while it's happening.
Yeah, you can almost think of it as a broader context too for understanding what barn owls do. So we can be more responsive to the community when those questions and those inevitable hard times come up. They're a boom and bust kind of species, and that can be a very difficult thing to experience online, as everybody learned, including us. One second. We're gonna
Charles,
take
are you coordinating at all with Steve Kress and Project Puffin, which has at least one or several bird camps?
Yeah, so I wouldn't say we coordinate with him. We talk with him in the hall all the time. He streams, all the cameras from Hog Island are streamed through explore.org, and that's through a grant with them. And so his whole streaming relationship is through explore.org. But he's a great resource at work. We trade cam management stories when we run into each other in the hall all the time. So yeah, so we don't do more than that, I guess, at this point. Did you have something else?
Okay, so we have another question from the online audience, and my apologies, my chat had actually frozen and I had to refresh. So of course there are questions there, and we'll catch up on those. One of the questions is, are we going to be able to have a live chat? And we've had that on some of our cams, not all of them, and we know that people really learn a lot from those chats. They can be very rich. They also are challenging to manage, as our moderators know. We couldn't do it without them. They put an incredible amount of effort into it. And it can be, exhausting at the level that we used to do with that number of hours in a day. I think it will be manageable to try to have live chat hours for restricted times, especially as we move forward with this NSF-funded project, which will, we want to find out what are the methods that do enrich learning the most, and that's definitely one we want to take a look at. But as far as rolling them out across all our cams, we find that with our current capacity, that's going to be a bit difficult to manage. So learning more about it, and if it does prove to be incredibly richer with learning, that's going to tell us it's worth the capacity to try to do as much of that as we can. So thank you for that question.
Were you and others at the lab surprised at just the level of enthusiasm that you received for all the various cams?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when I was, so the question was, were we surprised, thank you, were we surprised at sort of the level of, what was the word you used?
Enthusiasm.
Enthusiasm, yes, so the level of enthusiasm that we experienced after rolling out these cams. And honestly, I can remember interviewing for the position back in 2011, and being asked, what do you think, what would be a good response? And during an interview question, if this were a successful project, how many viewers would make it successful? And I'm sitting there going, thousands, tens of thousands. So in the one sense, I think that we had been shown what was possible by really the Decorah Eagle Cam, which had just skyrocketed as a platform for people learning about bald eagles. really the year before we started our program. And it really opened our eyes in some ways to the value of trying to engage people remotely in an experience that wasn't just about the science, or wasn't just about, that, I guess the way to put it is that also really thought about the viewer's experience watching it and put that kind of at the forefront. So, you know, covering the technology side where it's actually fun to watch it. It competes with almost anything else that you could want to watch because it's beautiful and it's got nice sound. But then using that as a platform to talk about birds, to bring people in. So were we surprised by the enthusiasm? I don't think we were surprised by like the fact that people were enthusiastic, because I mean, even us watching those first, all around the lab, the cameras were on from the moment, on people's computers, you know, from the moment that we flipped the switch and went public. We knew just from in the building and knowing that there's 47 people that self-identify as bird watchers basically in the United States, that there was a lot of potential there. But I think the level of not just watching, but also communicating. Like I said in like that second or third slide, the amount of interaction that happened. You know, if you think about something like TV being super passive, right? People sit and watch. Maybe there's other things to watch that maybe make you think more, but the fact so much energy was being spent on trying to understand and share what was happening, I think that was maybe what surprised us in a really good way. It made us think this is definitely something we need to keep working on and figuring out the way to increase its impact within our capacity. Thanks, Ferris.
Thank you.
So it sounds like some people in the chat may be having trouble with sound. Okay. So maybe we can just pause for a minute while we see if we can look into that.
Can you hear me now?
It's really weird to be on Ferris's stream.
We're still, we're not muted. I'm unfortunately a little bit at a loss as to why you might not be hearing us, because we haven't changed anything when we got to this part. So people can hear me on Ferris's chat, but not on our live stream. This is our way of letting everybody know that Ferris has a live stream.
So people can go to Ferris's to hear about.
Yes, I don't know if somebody could put the link in the chat for people to see, and I apologize.
So hold on, let's get the link going. Ferris, what's the easiest?
Go to Ustream. I think it's, hold on one second. I believe it's Ustream/Ferris Akel, but I'll try to find out.
I found it successfully just by Googling Ferris Akel.
Okay, that's the way to go.
Well, let me type that in.
Oops. See.
Yes, although if the audio isn't going through, then we won't have the audio on our archive either. I think it's good to think about. We started out this talk with some technical glitches, and I like to blame it on the fact that we're not using our own equipment. I learned something relying on some stuff that I tested earlier this week that seemed to work. But it's not. It shouldn't be bandwidth anyway.
All right. All right, so let's move on to questions, shall we?
Sure.
Question from the live stream audience. Any possibility for a cam on the gorge red-tailed hawk nest?
Right. That's been a. Do people here know about the gorge hawk nest? There's a hawk that nests on a gorge near campus, and we have a red-tailed hawk, that is. We have looked into what it would. We've talked to all the right people to start trying to understand what it would cost to install on that position, and we have preliminary approvals from some of those people. However, the it's moving at a glacial pace, and not because we're not asking questions. We're just having a hard time getting the answers out of the people that we need. So it's definitely on our radar screen as a possibility. It's very complicated because all of the internet infrastructure that's there is related to basically Cornell's secure internet for monitoring things out there. So there's some open questions with that and the fact that it has to be installed on city property. So I've had preliminary discussions with the city that seem very open to the idea, but at this point, there's nothing firm in place. Any more questions from folks here?
I have a question.
I think that one back there came up first.
We've seen human interference with the Condor cam.
Yep.
Is that allowable to any extent?
Yeah, so condors are a really interesting thing. So if you think about condors, okay, so the question was, we've seen human interference on the condor cam, is that even permissible? And in the case of the condors, the Bermuda petrels, most endangered species have management plans that outline exactly what and why biologists do what they do at those nests. So in the case of the condors, for example, there's a whole protocol outlining when they would try and do what they did for that. So it had nothing to do with it being live streamed for us. It had everything to do with trying to have as many wild condors in the environment as possible, because that's what they're charged with. Same thing with the Bermuda petrel, that those nest checks that are being done are to make sure that the nestlings are growing at the an ideal rate, that they're not basically fallen, gotten sick with something that could be fixed, basically to increase the likelihood that these very few birds that are being produced each year in the wild population have the greatest chance of going on and becoming productive adults in that population. So that's all the people interacting with those birds are working with the correct permits and the protocols and that kind of thing. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Great.
So, follow-up question from the live stream audience. Will you be able to film the Devil's Gate condor fledging?
So the question, yes, the question was, you guys all heard it. Would we be able to film the Devil's Gate fledging? So we had a plan in place to film the Coford's Ridge, the one we did last year. That was in that little cavity that you saw them go into. The configuration of the canyon is such that we could have that camera inside the cavity, and the next hillside is close enough that we could have put another camera over there and gotten a shot of the outside of the cavity. Potentially, both see the adults going in and out and the bird fledging. In the case of Devil's Gate, that's not possible. But it's something that the Fish and Wildlife are really interested in wherever it is possible. With the caveat that all of these cameras, they're not just plugging them in somewhere, they're all running on solar and they're all connected to each other on a point-to-point wireless network. So for example, to get that signal from Devil's Gate requires a solar panel big enough to power that camera, as well as an antenna that then talks to another antenna, a repeater, which then sends it up to the top of Hopper Mountain to another repeater, which then sends it all the way to Ventura, 35 miles, and a point-to-point wireless connection. And so each of those points for every camera have to be established except for that main one on Hopper. And that's why sometimes we have problems with the cam, because one of those can go down, and then obviously somebody has to go out and fix it. That actually sounds like fun, but they do not call me to go fix those things. I saw a few hands go up before. Hey, Carl.
Can you tell us, is there more that you can share about the grant and how people can engage in this sort of mutual science?
Yeah. Do you want to take that, Amber, or do you want us? Great.
So the question was if we could share a little bit more about the grant and what we're thinking when we say we can have research conducted by scientists and the viewers together. So I think this talk showed really well what planted the seed in our minds, right? Because you can already see discoveries being made on the cams that weren't in the scientific literature. You can already see every day people asking questions about what they're seeing on the cams, and sometimes contributing observations that alert us to something that we weren't aware of and can sometimes bring attention to it either to other scientists or even we'd like to be able to publish more in the scientific literature. So we know it's incipient, but what we don't have is an actual system or way to engage people to do that at a deeper level. It's kind of anecdotal and organic right now. And what we would like to do is corral that potential in a way that we can get the whole community, for example, working on a question together. So just as an example, the first thing that we want to try is on a feeder cam because we think that might be simpler to implement. So imagine that you're watching the feeder cam and we put out a call and we say, anybody with questions you're curious about investigating now that you're watching these cams. And we imagine we're going to get so many questions, and I don't want to say them all because you guys are going to come up with them. But then we would engage our team as well as a graduate student that we're going to bring on board to engage in dialogue. Okay, so we've got all these questions. What would it take to start to try to answer some of them? So then we start getting into the phase of protocols and study design. And people can think together, okay, what data would we actually need to collect to get that? And could we do it on these cams? Once we have a protocol or a method we can share with everyone and invite everyone to participate, what we would really love to have is live data annotation. Right now, there are quite a few projects that enable the public to annotate still images. There's a project called Zooniverse that's been fantastic for that, and they get, just thousands, probably millions of annotations. You may have heard about this for astronomy, where people are looking at astronomy images and helping to recognize stars and other phenomena in the universe. But what is less common is live annotation. And we know from you that live annotation is going to be probably more engaging than looking at snapshots that are archived or even footage that's archived. So we want to do both. We want to try to offer that you can go back in the archive and help us look for certain kinds of data and tag depending on the question, but we also would love to find a way for you to do that right when you're watching. Let's say we've collected all the data, kind of similar to what we saw with the Hawk community, putting that all in a spreadsheet, just happens to be in our database this time. We'd love to find a way for you as viewers to explore those data to query. And also, maybe you want to plot two things on a simple graph like the season and the number of each kind of prey or something like that. Finally, and this is kind of where we go back to that question about live chats, we'd love to have live Q&As with our scientists the way we do now, except those conversations might be focused in this case around the investigation. Okay, now that we have some data, now that we have some graphs to look at, how do we interpret this? What are some ways we could suggest that the meaning behind the data? And finally, it's going to be the graduate students charged to formally analyze those data statistically and then also to write them up for publication. It will definitely be publication on our website. We hope it will lead to publication in scientific journals. So you can imagine that sounds pretty ambitious. As I mentioned, this is a 3-year grant. And the grant is really to create prototypes to see if we can be successful with this kind of model, which is new. You don't see this happening anywhere else. And so it's going to be a learning process for all of us. And we hope to, by trial and error and evaluation, come up with something that we hope really works well. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. All right. So give me a second to look at my spreadsheet from the live chat here. So we have questions about whether any of the natural disaster events like hurricanes or wildfires have been affecting any of our camps.
Okay, yeah, so basically the quick answer is no. Did it come from there? Oh, you want me to read it anyway? Oh, okay, right. So the question was whether or not the hurricanes or any other natural disasters like the fires out west have affected any of our cams. And outside of taking the Savannah Osprey cams offline for a couple of days when power went out on Skidaway Island, all of the cameras have been up and running, and there aren't birds in them for the most part at this point in time. So even in Montana, the ospreys were there basically through a summer filled with smoke, and then left only recently. So they don't appear, the smoke didn't appear to have a negative effect, at least on their behavior around the cam.
What about in the Caribbean with the small nesting, burrow nesting?
Yeah, the petrels?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the nice thing about them, I mean, well, it's nice in a sense, they're far enough away from the Caribbean that they have yet to be impacted. So they're more almost you can think of them as being more an Atlantic island. So as Jose, if it ever comes closer to the U.S., if it does go towards the East Coast, Jose will be passing kind of between the U.S. and Bermuda there. Hurricanes are a huge threat to petrels, okay? So the whole reason why they've done, one of the main reasons why they've done these translocations, so all these man-made burrows in part were there to translocate young from other nests on smaller little islets to this larger, higher island to reduce the likelihood of hurricanes destroying the nests or killing adults or chicks. So hurricanes and just global sea level rise are two very big factors, both for petrels and for the albatrosses, actually. So not on Hawaii necessarily, but 98% of the world's population of Louisiana albatrosses are on 2 atolls in the middle of the Pacific that are only a few feet above the current level of the ocean. And it's predicted over the next 50 to 100 years that the intensity of storm events and just the sea level rise may make those islands much less productive than they are now, and possibly even remove them from being great places for albatrosses to breed. So on Hawaii, in some ways, people think about Hawaii as this interesting, like almost Noah's Ark in a way of the future because the islands are so much taller. But the challenge there is they're also filled with people and private property. So that sort of is a shout out to the work that the Kauai Albatross Network has been doing to interact with private landowners and increase awareness of what albatrosses need on Kauai. Great question. Anyone else in the room? Yeah, back there.
I just wonder how you handle a catastrophic loss of a cam. For example, this heron picture that I'm looking at right here. A few years ago, when those herons hatched out 5 babies and they went through that whole thing, that was just amazing. And then to learn that the nest was lost was just a tragedy. So I wonder, what's next? How do you handle that?
Right, so the question for folks online is how do we handle sort of the catastrophic loss of nests like what happened with the heron cam? Catastrophic in the sense that the nest basically fell out of the tree, and in that case they weren't really showing a lot of interest in breeding that year either. So the challenge, I guess, I don't know if it's a challenge exactly or it's a mindset or a perspective. There's very little we can control. And I come into this job, that's what I say to myself every day when I walk into work, because every day something I can't control, like glitches in presentations, is going to crop up because things are just too complex. So we can't control the natural world, we can't control most of the technology between me and this camera. I can control like how it's installed, but I can't control what happens to it after I install it a lot of the time. So part of it's just the mindset where even at cameras that are super important to us as a program because of just their following, and we know that following can have a big impact, there's still a limited ability of us to safeguard really anything about those cameras at the end of the day. But what we try to do is have different opportunities to engage audiences, always kind of like if you have a portfolio or a quiver full of different opportunities for people to interact with birds online. And then different individuals, hopefully, to rapidly be able to turn to and say, hey, can we make this happen? So that's really the only way we can deal with it. And I think by providing forums for people to talk about it, so that everybody can commiserate but understand what we've learned from it, be thankful for it. You know, those herons are a great story because Sapsucker Woods has been there for a long time. That pond was dug back in the 50s, okay? And yet, despite Sapsucker Woods being named roughly 10 years ago, as far as anybody knows, those 5 years that there were herons there were the only time during that 100 years that people have been watching where herons have nested in Sapsucker Woods. How lucky were we to be alive? And alive in a time where we could throw a camera up there and share it with the world. I mean, like, so a lot of it comes down to perspective too. We can be strategic, making partnerships with people so we can pivot very quickly if something does go down so that people still have this ability to connect and learn and share. But at the end of the day, we also have to, you know, acknowledge what we can't control and not let it get us down.
Those were amazing years, I must say.
They were. Here. They were amazing years.
All right, we have 2 questions from the online audience that relate to Ezra. One of them has to do with the art, the carving that David has done, and the other has to do with the planned educational panel. So first, since we have David in the audience, I'm going to give him the option of whether he wants to be put on the spot and come give the answer to this question himself, or whether he'd rather be summarized. But the answer is that they read in his bio that he's working on a full-size Big Red and Ezra at the Nest piece. And they wondered if that's going to have a home at Cornell. So David, would you like me to just do that, or you want to come up and share a little more about that work? Great, he's coming up. So online audience, give us a minute while David comes up. And we would just love to hear a little more about your plans for that carving, anything you want to share about Ezra and the carving that you displayed here tonight. And again, I'll repeat for the online audience that David has generously offered to donate his carving of Ezra, and the proceeds will go to the Lab of Ornithology. We've put a link into the chat if you're interested in more on that, and we'll also be sharing it on our website. David.
Thank you. So the full-size nest scene is something that I've been dreaming about since I first encountered Big Red and Ezra back in the early days of the campsite. And I've wondered how to best put that together, and I've had a lot of opportunities to design it. And when this last season really hit us hard with Ezra's passing, I was more and more dedicated to completing the project. But the nest scene will be full-size. The sculpture that's available now is a half-size study, which was basically done so I could convince myself that I could do in wood a portrait of Ezra, as opposed to, say, a painting or a drawing, which is a little bit easier to work with. So the study was to convince myself that I could use wood and actually do a portrait. And I think I've proven that that is the case, or at least I've proven it to myself. It's up to you to decide if Ezra. Thank you. So right now I'm working on Big Red in full size, and she started out as about a 15-pound block of wood, which is slowly being shaped into the pose that I envisioned for this nest scene. That will be a semi-mantled Big Red, hovering over some prey that she'll be feeding to some chicks. It has been my dream, as I expressed to Miyoko and the others here, that it has been my dream that when that work is complete, that I would like very much to donate it to Cornell for permanent display, so that the community can share it. I don't envision it as a work that will go up for sale. I can make other works, but this one will be expressly for the purpose of permanent display here at the Lab of Ornithology, because I know that it means so much to the people that have been part of the hawk ham community. And you know, I saw a lot of that today, where people feeling so much when they saw the carving of Ezra and how much it meant, how many people already miss him and continue to mourn for his loss, but this is just a little step to try to bring some of that back. So the answer is yes, it will be something that I will certainly make available to Cornell for permanent display. And I hope that's the case. It will be at least a 2-year project. I am working on it now, and I anticipate at least a 2-year project because the half-size study took about 8 months to complete that one piece. So I'm being very optimistic and thinking that I can complete the whole nest scene in 2 years. But you never know, with all this energy behind it, maybe it'll go a little bit faster. Not much faster, because it is incredibly detailed work. So thank you.
Thanks so much, David. So one last related question about Ezra from the online audience, and then we'll maybe take one more from the audience here, and then we'll close out our Q&A for tonight and have to see you back online after this. So the question is, can you tell a little bit more about the plans for the educational panel that's a tribute to Ezra? So there were lots of ideas that we received about how can we best pay tribute to Ezra, who's really touched us all so much. And after a lot of thought and discussion, one really thing that we thought would be very meaningful is to think about what legacy Ezra gave us. And it is that legacy about look up, because what can you experience and learn by doing that? We wanted to share that with the Cornell community because as some of you may have seen when you parked near Tower Road and those nests are right above you, it's really easy to walk by and not even know that they're there. I walked by for years and didn't know that red-tails were on campus and nesting. And so we just feel if only more students and more faculty and people on campus knew to look up, that they would be able to experience some of the things that we have as a camp community. A wonderful coincidence happened, which is that Cornell is working on a sustainability trail right off of Tower Road. Some of you might be familiar with the Dairy Bar, and across the street they're facing plantations. They're going to put in a green parking lot, and then the little walkway that goes from there over to Mann Library and to where we are tonight will be a sustainability trail where they'd like to put in more education about sustainability on campus. Another coincidence is that Carl and Cindy brought to our attention a spot where Ezra used to love to perch above the Botanic Gardens there, as well as where the hawks would hunt on a grassy hillside. And they recounted this anecdote of seeing one of the Botanic Garden landscapers really actually taking care of that hillside for hawks. He was trying to maintain the grasses so that it would attract the hawks in. Because by attracting the hawks, he could get natural rodent control instead of using pesticides. And we know that pesticides can be, or rodenticides can be really harmful for hawks because if they nab a rodent that has that in their system, those can be an anticoagulant in their own system, which can hurt the hawks. So how beautiful that here at Cornell, the landscapers were creating habitat for the hawks and for other wildlife, and it happened to be at a spot right along the sustainability trail. So we're collaborating with Botanic Gardens and with facilities here to install that in the next year. We've drafted the text, which has 3 parts. The first part is, well, it's called Look Up, and it encourages people to think about the habitat that they're seeing and lists 10 birds that they can see, including red-tails, of course. And then the next section tells a little bit about sustainability, and then there's a little blurb about that sentiment from the Hawk Camp community about what you can experience by taking that time. So I want to thank everybody who not only contributed donations for that, but who also contributed ideas. It was a collaborative project, as is everything that we do. So, one last question for the night.
Go for it.
I appreciate what you said about savoring the moment or the experience, because we're not entitled to them. They're just given to us. And as one of those people who really struggled today to come and see the places where Ezra had been and all the places I've heard Baguette and Carl taking us all over campus, following them. I understand that there's work still being done on the hawk cam. And the other part of the question is, since I've kind of moved away, in fact, I've focused on this one cardinal in my neighborhood who seems to like my corner of the neighborhood, and he sings almost all the time. And he's a daddy, and I think he must be a wonderful daddy, although I didn't see any babies. What is going on that we know of about Big Red and her friend?
Great, so the question is two parts. One of them I might have to ask for some help answering, but the questions involved it sounds like there's some work going on the hawk cams. Can we talk about that? And what do we know about what's going on with Big Red and the other hawks she's been hanging out with this summer? So I'll take the first part for sure. As you all probably know, the hawk cams have been offline for several months, and that all stems from essentially a failure in the cabling that connects our network that's up on those poles to the infrastructure in Weil Hall. So when it went offline, I worked for about 6 weeks with CIT to try and salvage that connection. And at the end of it, they just said, look, it's just not going to work. You need to go to this, you basically need to upgrade it all to fiber. Which is great, I mean, it just costs a pretty penny to upgrade to fiber. But the biggest issue with that is we then had to get into a queue, basically, for CIT to do that work. And that queue was about 2 months long. Anybody who's been at Cornell in the summer knows that there's a lot of construction that happens here in the summer. And there's a number of buildings that are going up all around campus and even off campus that their small team of basically their cabling experts were responsible for. So just last week, we finished upgrading the connection from Weil to that first pole with fiber. So we're connected now with basically more bandwidth than we've ever had before. And I've been running a test event, basically a test live stream for the last couple days to see how stable the cameras are and to make sure that everything's working. And probably early next week, I'll flip the switch to make that public. And not that we expect anything to be flying in on camera anytime soon, but you never know. In past years, Big Red and Ezra had visited off and on through the winter each of those nests. So we'll probably have one camera on at each nest so that viewers can view and toggle between the two of them. So I'm really excited about that. We have, we may have the ability, if they do stick together through and decide to breed, if Big Red does decide to breed on one of those towers, we'll be ready to go. If she picks a different tower, it's a hard question, because the one thing I'll say is with Ezra, we knew they had a long history together breeding on those towers already. So my ability to be conservative about the impact that we would have rapidly deploying a cam over the course of a couple days on a site they were actively building on, as we did with the Weil Hall nest, I felt fairly comfortable with that because I had watched and been around those birds and seen them react to us, seen their ease and basically nonchalance. Sometimes we'd be 20 feet below them on the pole, they'd be mating up on the platform, and so we don't want to ruin anything that could happen. And we don't know as much about the new guy, if it turns out to be the new guy, and his reaction to us being up and around. So we'll just have to take it as it comes, but we do have we've got it figured out how to make it happen fairly quickly on those posts. We just don't want to also ruin anything by getting up there and potentially disturbing them. So we have a couple of contingency plans as well. I wonder if I could turn that second question around to the birders on the ground that are in the room. I know Carl and Cindy have been telling me the last couple of days that you have seen Big Red. And I don't know if Ferris or anybody else here has as well, but would you guys like to share any observations from the last couple of days on the two of them?
Yeah, so Winkin,
Carl, would you be willing to come up here so that the online audience can hear? Thanks.
I'm not a college student anymore. So a couple of things that we've noticed about Big Red and Winkin's behavior is that, first of all, there seems to be quite a bit of commitment between the two of them. We've seen Winkin guarding Big Red when she takes baths. in the gorge. He has demonstrated his ability to defend the territory. I mean, there was concern among all of us when, after Ezra died, and Big Red was so distraught and traveling the territory. She covered 8 territories one day looking for Ezra. And she flew all the way out to Varna and Snyder Hill, and then over the Horsey Hill area, and then she flew diagonally across into Cuba Heights, and then she flew across North Campus, and so she basically touched 8 hawk territories, flew right through them, and was challenged in some of them, and basically held her own, but she was looking for Ezra. But Winkin has, among the ones, the males that have visited, she one day went off to the northeast, and we thought, in fact, that she might be leaving the territory because it had been a difficult time, and and remember, this was Ezra's territory. This was in Big Red's territory. So she came and joined him here. She was from Brookendale. She's a country girl off to the east. And, but this was he was a city guy. This was his territory, and so he brought her here. So she could have easily decided that she could not manage this territory and had gone off with somebody else. The good news is that everybody else was busy, with their own territories that they were having to deal with and their own nests and so forth. So she had a couple of suitors, and Winkin seemed to be the guy who was most adamant about his interest. And an example of his defense was defending the southeast territory against the Horsey Hill Hawks, which are pretty aggressive, actually. Big Red and Ezra had to do that together. They couldn't do that separately. They were a very aggressive pair in that area. But one day, Winkin chased off 3 vultures to the east. It was kind of like Harold of England, if you know the story. They were all related back then, right? And so you had the Vikings, and you had the Normans, and they were all kind of clans, and they were all struggling to take over England at the time, Britain. And Harold of England had to march to the north to defeat the Vikings, which he did, but he left his archers behind, and he had to then come down to the south because William of Normandy had come to land across the British Channel. And so he had no archers, and so he had to go ahead and challenge the Normans, and they were defeated because of the fact that they couldn't defend themselves against the archers at long distance. So Winkin went and chased off 3 vultures off to the east, way out over the plantations, and then he came back immediately. And Big Red was up on the Bradfield, and he challenged 2 red-tailed hawks that had come in from the north and chased them off. And then he finally came back and sat on the tower. So they tried to mate. We've seen them do that, and they have done the separate thing. He's got a mind of his own. So he has his times when he goes separately, and they have spent time on Riley Rob together in the sunshine, and they have done some preening and some kisses a little bit. And so they did start talking about the nests that Charles was talking about. They did. I don't know if you're familiar with, you have the wild nest, right? And then you have the fertile nest, and then there's what we call the third base tower. And they had done some work on that nest, and you can go out there and you can see that it's sort of partially built. But in the end, what they decided to do was to actually take the fertile nest. Remember, all the nests are on the west end of the platforms. And so they decided to take the fertile nest and move it stick by stick all the way to the east end of the platform. So they rebuilt a nest on the east side of that platform. So there's some interesting indications, that they are hanging together. We'll see what happens during the winter time, and then in the spring when they challenge each other to see whether or not they're capable of defending and fighting and getting prey and so forth. So it's an interesting time. He's a young guy, and she's not so young, but it doesn't seem to matter. They're doing pretty well. He's gotten. He was very champagne colored, very light colored naturally, but his molting, he's darkened up quite a bit. He's got some of the nice red on his shoulders and stuff like that. So they're like an old married couple. they start to look like each other. So anyway, we'll see what happens, whether or not they stick together, and we'll see what happens in the springtime.
Thanks a lot, Carl. Well, with that, I think that's going to bring tonight's event here to a close. I want to thank everybody for showing up online and in person. We're going to feel free to grab a bite on your way out, and we're going to do our best to archive the talk out to see how the audio comes out. So I apologize for the issues. And hopefully it's not indicative of our efforts moving forward with any of our other technological projects that we might be planning. Thank you all for coming, and can't wait to keep conversing with you online or in person when we get the chance. So thank you. And you're welcome to keep talking to us while you're cooking. You don't have to run out or anything. Okay, press.
Yeah, so we have door prizes here. And then please, when you leave, do take some food because we have a lot. Right, so what's the first item?
Let's do.
Okay. So here's a book called Into the Nest, and it was authored by Laura Erickson, who some of you may remember from the Heron Camp. She spent a lot of time on our Heron Camp. She used to work as a science editor at the Lab of Ornithology. And this book goes to Emma Nguyen. Okay, another one for Jenny Lawson.
Jenny, are you still here? Jenny? Wow.
And apologies if I mispronounce anyone's name, but this one I can get, Ann Smith. Okay, this is a book that I wrote called Songbird Journeys. This is for Paul Kuchik. Paul. Another one for Deb Arden.
Deb. Hey.
Okay, those of you who watch our Albatross Cam know Hob Osterlund, who works at the Hawaii Albatross Network. She's written this beautiful book, Holy Mola, is that? Mola. Okay. I read it, it's a beautiful book. I heartily recommend it. And it's for Harvey Lyjek.
Harvey? Any Harveys? Harvey? No?
Okay, there's a present to win, so this goes to Betty Raleigh. And another one for Wendy Dedrick.
Wendy? Here? Back there?
We have this beautiful print of Big Red in flight. This was taken by our computer programmer, Franz Durage, in our first year. And the first one is for Randy Latham. I have drawn up Carl's name. I think they might have this already, so should we go to the next prize for Carl? Do you want another one, or shall we give you something else?
We have it, yes.
You have it?
Yeah, thank you.
Yes. What do they not have?
For Ken's t-shirt?
You have a can?
Oh, there you go.
There you go.
Do you have, can you have a small, please?
No.
We only got two sizes, so one of those don't work if you size.
So since Carl has this already, here's the one for Cindy Redford.
Cindy? Great.
And Donovan Beatty.
Wow.
This is something new from the Cornell Lab Publishing book. It's a 2018 Bird a Day calendar. This one is the Western version. We also have Eastern. And I really recommend this calendar because it's filled with beautiful photos every day and tips on the weekends, including a bird cam photo. And it's for Noel Dunham. Another book from our publishing imprint. This one is all about backyard birds. It's based on our website, and it's all condensed into a book, and it is for Sybil Latham. Okay. This book, The Joy of Bird Feeding, is written by Jim Carpenter, who is the host of our Barn Owl Camp. And it's really going to tell you everything you want to know about bird feeding. It's for Suzanne Elijah. Not here. Yeah. Christina Daly. Oh, this one's blank. Okay. This is a book from our publishing imprint called Backyard Birds and Blossoms. It's a coloring book, and it talks about backyards as well as letting you relax and color. And it is for Suzanne Horning.
We have 3 bird cam shirts left, 2 sizes though. So
Okay.
let's see.
This one is for Debbie Cohen. We got 2 more?
Okay,
How
2
about
more.
one
Vote.
for Karen Putic?
One last one.
And with the last one of the night for Talon Stade.
Right.
Okay.
You have to grow into this one, Tal.
Thank you so much, everyone.
It's your birthday?
I look forward to talking to you and seeing you all.
Also, please feel free to grab some food when you go out. Or,
Hey everybody, we are just about done, I think, for the night. Hope you enjoyed whatever we were able to show you. One more look at that beautiful picture that's up on the screen.
At least I got something.
And we're gonna keep looking up. Good night, everybody. Take care.